welcome. We're so glad you're joining us for this deep dive today. We're pointing a magnifying glass at this dynamic that you have probably felt in your bones, even if you never really had the exact terminology for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things everyone just sort of silently accepts.
Right. And I actually want to start by dropping a single line from our source material today that it immediately grabs you right by the collar. It says, "In many offices, honesty is the fastest way to get punished."
Yeah, it's such a striking statement, right?
Yeah.
Because it completely upends that traditional narrative we're all fed about professional life from, day one.
That honesty is the best policy.
Exactly. We're taught that feedback is a gift and that meritocracies thrive because the best ideas just naturally win out.
But our source material today really just shatters that illusion. So we're looking at this really fascinating report, which was actually originally structured as a research document for a video exploring modern workplace dynamics.
Right, a really deep look into the actual day-to-day culture.
Yeah. And the mission for our deep dive today is to take that report and basically figure out why speaking up has become so dangerous in the modern office. We are going to decode what the term psychological safety actually means, like in hard practical terms.
Which is so needed right now.
It really is. And most importantly, we're going to build a survival playbook for how you, the listener, can navigate or maybe even fix a fundamentally broken workplace culture.
Because the stakes outlined in this research they're incredibly high.
Yeah.
When honesty becomes a calculated risk, it doesn't just make for, an uncomfortable Tuesday afternoon staff meeting.
Right. It's way bigger than that.
It triggers this whole cascade of systemic failures. It can literally rot a company from the inside out, blinding the leadership to massive operational flaws until it's far too late to fix them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the phrase that gets thrown around constantly in this report, and frankly, if you spend any time on corporate LinkedIn, it's everywhere, is psychological safety.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the buzzword of the decade.
Right. And I have to be honest, when people hear that phrase, there is often this massive collective eye roll, because for an audience that follows business trends, the term has been somewhat hijacked, I think.
Yeah, definitely misunderstood.
Yeah, people hear psychological safety and they think it just means being nice, right? They think it implies coddling employees or handing out participation trophies and, making sure nobody ever feels challenged or gets their feelings hurt during a quarterly review. So how does the source material actually strip away that HR buzzword definition?
Well, the report forces us to look completely past the corporate jargon, right? Mm-hmm. It frames this as a strict economic imperative. The sources define psychological safety as the fundamental shared belief that team members will not be punished or humiliated or retaliated against just for doing their actual jobs.
Okay, so it's not about being comfortable all the time.
Not at all. It is literally the freedom to challenge ideas, ask difficult questions, maybe admit to catastrophic mistakes, or point out flawed logic without, a target suddenly appearing on your back.
I see.
It's all about removing the friction of professional retaliation, not removing the intellectual challenge of the work itself.
Right, which means it's not about shielding people from accountability at all. It's about shielding them from toxic fallout when they actually try to make the work better.
Exactly.
And that realization kind of bridges us to the first major concept in the report, because psychological safety isn't just like a policy you can blindly write into an employee handbook. It represents a much deeper, almost philosophical agreement between an employee and their employer.
Yeah, the report actually labels this the deeper contract.
The deeper contract, right.
Because when you strip away the compensation and the health benefits and, the stock options, the core question every single employee secretly asks themselves every single day is, if I am honest, will I be protected or punished?
Like if I point out that this Q3 timeline is completely detached from reality, will my manager thank me for catching a disaster early?
Or will you be permanently labeled as not a team player?
Right, and then you get subtly excluded from the next big strategy meeting.
Exactly. And when honesty results in that subtle exclusion, when that deeper contract breaks, the workplace is actively teaching you a whole new set of rules. The environment conditions you to understand that your survival in that company depends entirely on your silence, not your truth.
Wow. I mean, it sounds exactly like a hostile ecosystem in the natural world, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you drop a creature into an environment that is fundamentally predatory, its survival depends almost entirely on camouflage.
Yes, that is a perfect way to put it.
You just blend into the background, you keep your head down, and you keep your mouth firmly shut to avoid being eaten by the apex predators in leadership.
What's fascinating here is the sheer cognitive load required to maintain that professional camouflage all day.
Oh, I bet. It's got to be exhausting.
It is. Pretending to agree with flawed strategies, constantly monitoring your own language just to avoid triggering a defensive boss. It takes an immense amount of psychological energy. And the report really illustrates how this exhaustion leads directly to a pattern they call the silent quit.
The silent quit. Which, just to clarify, is distinct from the Great Resignation or like loudly walking out the door.
Oh, it's very distinct.
Yeah.
People rarely experience a single toxic moment and then angrily resign the next morning.
Right.
The breakdown of psychological safety creates this sort of slow-motion organizational decay. Long-time, highly skilled employees disengage mentally months, sometimes even years, before they actually hand in their formal resignation.
Wow. So they surrender their emotional investment long before they surrender their badge.
Exactly. Because caring has literally become a liability.
That makes so much sense. If caring about the product means speaking up, and speaking up gets you mocked or sidelined, well, the only logical self-preserving move is to turn off your caring mechanism entirely. That camouflage is just so exhausting. And it's that sheer exhaustion that breeds the next symptom the report identifies. Let's look at what this survival mode actually looks like in practice. Because the sources point out a profound and dangerous miscalculation happening in corner offices everywhere. Leaders look out at a completely quiet meeting room, and they just assume they have consensus.
And viewing a quiet room as a successful meeting is perhaps the most dangerous misinterpretation a manager could ever make.
Right, because silence doesn't mean everyone agrees.
Exactly. The report emphasizes heavily that silence does not equal agreement. Silence almost always signifies a broken feedback loop. When employees are quiet, leadership assumes compliance, completely missing that the silence is actually a calculated threat response.
They're just trying to survive.
Right. The employees have assessed the risk of speaking and deemed it way too high. And the sources provide a series of just chillingly recognizable case studies detailing what this sounds like in the real world.
Yeah, let's dissect the mechanisms behind those case studies, starting with the junior engineer. So this person is, reviewing code or looking at a critical project architecture, and they spot a massive bug, but they stay completely silent.
Right.
And the report explains that the last time this exact engineer spoke up about an issue, they were mocked in front of the entire team for overthinking it or, slowing down the sprint.
And the cruel irony there is that the environment just taught them that being thorough, which is literally their job, is a punishable offense.
Wow. Yeah.
The memory of that public humiliation totally overrides their professional duty to report the bug.
Oh.
So they keep quiet. And what happens? The bug inevitably makes it to production, explodes later down the line, and costs the company massive amounts of time and capital.
And the tragedy is leadership looks at the wreckage and just blames it on junior incompetence, right?
Completely. Failing entirely to realize that the team's toxic culture is what actually caused the failure.
Right. And then we have the new employee case study. Someone fresh to the industry, eager to learn, completely untainted by the company's baggage. They ask a simple, clarifying question in a planning meeting.
A totally normal thing to do.
Exactly. But the manager responds with heavy sarcasm, maybe saying something like, well, you're clearly not prepared for this level of discussion, or making a subtle joke that just humiliates the new hire in front of their new peers.
And the physiological response for that employee is an immediate spike in cortisol.
Yeah, total panic. And the result, that employee learns the unwritten rule on week one and never, ever speaks up in a meeting again. Their fresh perspective, which is exactly what the company hired them for, is permanently lost.
Yeah. And we also see the inverse of that dynamic in the report, the favorite employee.
Oh, man.
Right? This is the individual who routinely misses deadlines, actively shifts the blame onto their juniors for their own strategic failures, but because they are cherished by upper leadership, or maybe they just gulf with the CEO, they escape all accountability.
Literally everyone listening has worked with a version of this person.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And the toxic ripple effect of the favorite is profound. The rest of the team constantly calibrates their own risk based on how that person is treated.
Because they see the favorite protected.
Exactly. Which sends a clear signal that the system's completely rigged. The rest of the team won't dare complain, knowing that raising the issue will only result in them being labeled as jealous or negative or difficult to manage.
I notice a really fascinating symptom of this in the report, too, this idea of the migration of truth. The concept that when official meetings become unsafe, honesty doesn't just evaporate, right? It goes underground.
Yes, the shadow communication network.
Right. It moves to hidden WhatsApp groups. Team members sit in total silence during the official Zoom call, and then the second it ends, the private group chat just lights up with all the real feedback, all the complaining, all the actual analysis of the flawed strategy. But let me push back on this for a second, because I think a lot of leaders might hear this and get defensive. Isn't a private venting chat just a totally normal, necessary part of modern office life? I mean, people need to blow off steam. Does the existence of hidden WhatsApp gossip really prove a culture is inherently toxic?
That's a fair question. Venting is absolutely a natural human behavior, and the occasional grumble in a side chat is normal. But the source makes a crucial defining distinction here.
Okay.
It is not the mere existence of the WhatsApp group that proves the culture is toxic. It is when the WhatsApp group becomes the only place where real feedback happens.
Oh, I see.
When the official channels, the team meetings, the weekly one-on-ones, the performance reviews are completely devoid of honesty and just feature employees nodding along while all the actual truth has migrated to the shadows.
Yeah.
That is a glaring symptom that psychological safety is dead.
Because if the critical issues are only being raised in an encrypted chat among peers, they're never reaching the people who actually have the authority and the budget to fix them. The problems just fester in the dark.
Exactly. No systemic issues get resolved, and the organizational decay just accelerates. And the sources highlight an alarming reality about this dynamic. Psychological safety, or the lack thereof, is highly contagious.
Contagious how?
Well, it does not require a sweeping policy change or an entirely corrupt executive board to ruin a company's culture. One toxic middle manager who rules by sarcasm, or one protected favorite who operates without consequences, can infect the behavioral norms of the entire division.
The silence just spreads like a virus.
It really does.
Which brings us to a massive realization in the scope of this research. These case studies, the mocked engineer, the sarcastic manager, the shadow communication networks, these aren't just isolated bad days at the office. The report scales this up to a macro level. These micro interactions are fueling a massive global epidemic.
Oh, the statistics provided in the sources are staggering. Studies indicate that more than half of workers worldwide report feeling actively burnt out or thoroughly disengaged from their jobs.
More than half.
Wow. And toxicity in the workplace culture is identified as a primary driver of that global burnout. We are talking about millions of professionals spending the majority of their waking hours in a state of professional camouflage, which, as we established earlier, is physiologically and emotionally draining.
It really is. And the sources dive deeply into how this global issue interacts with specific regional cultures, too, particularly focusing on intense debates currently happening within the Indian corporate landscape. And, it's important to note for you listening, we are absolutely not endorsing these viewpoints or taking sides in this cultural debate.
Right, of course.
We are simply trying to impartially convey the insights and ideas contained in our source material today regarding these patriarchal workplace structures. But the report notes that Indian youth and early career professionals are increasingly pushing back against the status quo.
Yes, they are actively rejecting hustle culture and demanding psychological safety in environments that have historically not prioritized it at all.
Right. The report details the specific cultural frictions at play here. It points out stereotypes and ingrained norms that make it uniquely difficult for junior employees in traditional Indian corporate structures to speak up.
Yeah, the sources list heavy expectations. Things like seniors must be obeyed without question, or the deeply rooted idea that one must never challenge authority publicly.
And that pervasive internal dialogue among juniors that it is simply not my place to voice a strategic concern to a superior.
Exactly. The research frames this as a significant high-stakes clash between deeply traditional hierarchical expectations and the modern global demand for rapid innovation, which inherently requires a psychologically safe workplace to actually function.
So what does this all mean? I mean, if you are listening to this right now and you work in a highly traditional or deeply hierarchical global team, whether that is in India or anywhere else in the world, and you're feeling that daily friction between the market's need for good ideas and your culture's demand for silent obedience, what is the actual economic impact on the business?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, The organizations that refuse to adapt to this shifting expectation, the ones that stubbornly rely on silence and absolute top-down obedience, are heavily bleeding talent.
They're losing their best people.
Yes. The sources are definitive on the economic outcomes. Organizations that actively, systematically fix psychological safety are the ones that retain their top talent. They see a surge in innovation because their engineers and creatives aren't terrified to propose unconventional ideas.
Right.
And they successfully stop the financial bleed of that quiet quitting phenomenon. They survive the modern market simply because they allow the truth to be spoken out loud.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This perfectly sets up the most critical part of our deep dive today, the survival playbook. Because if you recognize your own daily reality in these burnout statistics, or if you recognize your manager's exact behaviors in these case studies, you need a strategy to navigate this without torpedoing your own career or your mental health.
Yep.
So, the source material breaks down highly actionable advice for both sides of the corporate ladder. Let's start with employees, from fresh grads all the way to middle managers who might be trapped under toxic leadership.
The primary tactical advice for employees is to start small and safe. The report acknowledges that you cannot simply walk into the boardroom tomorrow, declare the culture toxic, and expect a standing ovation.
Yeah, that's not going to end well.
No, it won't. You have to test the waters of honesty in low-risk moments to sort of gauge leadership's true capacity for feedback.
It's almost like testing the temperature of boiling bath water with just your toe, right?
That's a great way to look at it.
You don't jump all the way in immediately and risk third-degree burns. You just dip a toe to see if the environment is safe enough to proceed.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, how do you actually execute that toe dip in a high-pressure meeting?
You execute it by using carefully calibrated, non-threatening language. The report provides excellent scripts designed to bypass a manager's defense mechanisms.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, in a toxic environment, if you say, this deadline is ridiculous and you are overworking the team, you are almost guaranteed to trigger an amygdala hijack in your manager. They will perceive it as a direct attack and they will retaliate.
Naturally.
So you reframe the truth. You say something like, I'm finding this workload challenging given the current timeline. Can we sit down and prioritize these tasks to ensure quality?
Ah, I see. Or instead of saying, your strategic instructions make absolutely no sense, you pivot and say, I'm really trying to understand the end goal here so I can deliver the best result. Can you clarify this specific point?
Exactly. You are still speaking up. You are still forcing a pause to address the real issue, but you are actively removing the conversational spikes that trigger a fragile ego.
Building on that, the most critical defensive piece of advice for employees navigating these spaces is to document absolutely everything, right?
Yes. Keep meticulous time-stamped notes of your assigned tasks, the shifting timelines you're given, and summaries of the verbal conversations you have with leadership.
Because memory is so subjective.
Well, and the psychological mechanism here is vital. In a truly toxic culture, leadership will often literally gaslight employees to cover their own mistakes. Memory becomes a weapon. Your documentation is your objective shield against that manipulation.
That is huge. Okay, let's flip the script and look at the playbook for managers and leaders. Because if you are managing a team and you are hearing this, the silence in your meetings is your worst enemy.
It's a ticking time bomb.
Exactly. The sources dictate that managers must explicitly invite feedback. You can't just casually mention an open door policy in onboarding and assume people will just walk in.
No, nobody believes the open door policy.
Right. You have to actively dismantle the assumed risk by asking direct questions like, what is not working right now in this process? Or, if something I just proposed sounds flawed, please tell me now so we can fix it.
And asking a question is only the setup. The defining moment, the exact moment the entire team is watching to calibrate their own future risk, is how the manager responds to the answer.
Oh, the reaction is everything.
The report insists that managers must respond gracefully, not defensively. If a junior employee takes the massive risk to tell you a process is broken, you must thank them publicly. You must take action to fix the problem where possible.
Because if you get defensive
or make an excuse, you have just unequivocally proven to the entire room that your invitation for feedback was a trap and it is not safe to speak up.
The report also emphasizes that you have to actively protect the people who do speak up. You appreciate their candor publicly, making them the shining example of what good participation looks like.
Yes, model the behavior you want.
And crucially, you have to possess the courage to punish the bullies. If you have a top-performing employee who, crushes their sales numbers every quarter but routinely humiliates their juniors on calls, and you do nothing, You are actively choosing the toxic culture over the health of the team.
Completely. The sources also recommend utilizing anonymous pulse checks, just quick, regular surveys, simply asking, how safe do you feel to speak up, to catch that silent decay before it becomes terminal.
It is an incredibly comprehensive playbook. But you'll notice that the success of these managerial tactics hinges entirely on leadership possessing the humility to actually want to know the unvarnished truth.
Which is often the biggest hurdle.
Right. Which brings me to a really critical question for you regarding the limits of this advice. We just talked about employees dipping their toes in the water, using non-threatening vocabulary, and testing the waters.
Sure.
Is it really possible to fix a deeply entrenched, toxic organizational culture from the bottom up simply by changing how you phrase your pushback? Or is psychological safety ultimately, unavoidably, a top-down leadership issue that lower-level employees are essentially powerless to change?
This raises an important question, and, to its credit, the source material does not shy away from the harsh reality of corporate dynamics here.
Okay.
While changing your language and documenting everything can absolutely protect you in the short term, and it might even improve the immediate microculture of your small pod or team, a fundamentally toxic culture cannot be cured purely from the bottom up.
So there's a ceiling to what an employee can do.
Yes. The report lays out a final, very stark truth. For employees dealing with systemic issues, you must know your absolute limits.
Meaning you can't just absorb the toxicity indefinitely?
Meaning if your workplace consistently bullies you or dismisses your expertise or punishes your honesty despite your absolute best efforts to communicate professionally and use the playbook, you cannot sacrifice yourself to fix them.
Yeah.
The playbook dictates that you must escalate the issue to HR or higher leadership. And if the organization responds to that escalation by protecting the toxicity, which unfortunately happens often, your playbook shrinks to only two viable options. You plan for a massive internal change of departments, or you plan your exit strategy.
Wow. Do not stay silent forever.
The overarching lesson the data provides is that speaking the truth should be rewarded with progress. When your professional reality dictates that honesty is routinely punished and the organization stubbornly refuses to course correct, staying silent indefinitely will only destroy your own engagement, your career trajectory, and your mental health. You have to recognize when the environment is unsurvivable and just plan your exit.
That is incredibly clarifying, and it really puts the power back in the listener's hands. So let's bring this all together. Our mission today was to decode the hidden contract of psychological safety, and I think we've done exactly that.
I think so too.
We've exposed why the sound of silence in a meeting room is actually a blaring alarm bell. We've broken down the cognitive load of hiding who you are at work, and we've laid out the playbook for both surviving a toxic office and the actionable steps courageous leaders need to take to actually fix it.
It really all cycles back to that initial arresting quote from the top of our discussion. We have an economic and a moral imperative to build environments where honesty is the fastest way to progress, not the fastest way to get punished.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering thought to mull over. Our source material today spent a significant amount of time focused on the professional and organizational costs of a toxic workplace.
Right, the stalled careers, the hidden bugs exploding in production.
Exactly. The slow motion decay of a company's ability to innovate. But I want you to step away from the corporate spreadsheets for a moment and consider the deeply personal psychological cost of not speaking up. If you are spending 40 hours a week actively suppressing your true thoughts, if you are spending the majority of your waking life burning energy to maintain professional camouflage just to survive the workday, how does that cultural dishonesty leak into your personal life?
That is a heavy question.
It is. If you spend all day long conditioning your brain to nod and pretend to agree with bad ideas at work, does that slowly, imperceptibly change who you are when you walk through your front door at home? It is something profound for you to think about the next time you find yourself sitting in a quiet room, weighing the true cost of staying silent. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.